Will the gentlelady yield for a moment, just to elaborate this point?
Absolutely.
The letter that you sent to Ms. Barrera said, if you fail to depart the United States within 33 days of the date of this letter, USCIS may issue you a notice to appear and commence removal proceedings against you with the immigration court. That's coming from USCIS. That's not coming from ICE.
No, that's all true.
Well, so in what sense are you not threatening to remove people from the country?
Well, again, I'm not an attorney, but words have meanings. What we indicate that is if they do not, what we indicate is that if they do not depart the country within 33 days in that paragraph, if they do not depart the country within 33 days, they may be issued a notice of intent to a notice to appear. That is accurate. At that time,
notice to appear and for the purpose of commencing removal proceedings.
But it does not say they will. It does not say they must leave the country.
But okay.
It's what it says. We're talking about the words.
With all due respect, Mr. Renaud, we're talking about people who have cystic fibrosis, childhood cancer, and so on. You're sending this to them in a change of policy, which clearly indicates that they're going to be removed or have a very heavy likelihood of being removed from the country. I'm going to yield another 30 seconds to my colleague. Thank you for
Thank you,
yielding.
Mr. Chair. For the questions that you've not answered, based on pending litigation, do you actually know the answers to those questions? Do you know the answers and you're not sharing them, or you don't know? Do you know the answers to the questions that I've asked that you declined to answer?
I understand your question.
Okay.
I was trying to decide if I knew. I do not know the answers to all of your questions, no.
To any of them?
I'm sorry?
To any of them? To any of the questions that I asked regarding the genesis of this policy, was it ordered by a political appointee? What office did this come from? How many cases have been processed? Do you know the answers to any of those questions?
I certainly think that without a pending lawsuit, I would be able to provide additional information.
I yield.
Okay. The gentlelady yields, and we come to Mr. Grothman for 5 minutes.
Right. As I mentioned earlier today to the first panel, I think you folks do a tremendous job. I've been at the border 3 times this year. I know you would do a very difficult job. Everybody who I have run into has been the pinnacle of professionalism. Everybody has exhibited 100% concern about people in this country who are not citizens, who even people who came here legally, goes out of their way to provide medical care that would not even be available to American citizens, and they do it without complaining. I complain a little, but they do it. So I'd like to thank you for all your agencies do. Looking at this letter that they're talking about, it appears to me this letter is a form letter. Do you think that's true?
That is correct.
Would anybody who made out this letter know that Ms. Barbera had a medical condition?
I think that when the letter was drafted, we certainly understood that there was a wide range of cases under consideration that would be denied, including some medical issues. Yes.
Okay, but did you know specifically when you sent this letter to Ms. Barrera that she had a medical condition?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would like to say yes. I think that we probably pulled the case, looked at it, and decided to deny it.
I think what you're trying to tell us here is that there are opportunities to appeal. And when you appeal, almost certainly, I shouldn't say almost certainly, certainly, the 2 people who are on the previous panel were not going to be kicked out of this country, right? We have a process. Many people have to be kicked out. Some people shouldn't. Okay, as you work your way through the process, people like these 2 folks almost certainly will not be kicked out of the country. Is that accurate?
I think it's accurate to say that in my career, in my experience, when you run into a situation similar to the individuals that were here earlier, prosecutorial discretion would be used.
Right. I mean, the point I'm trying to make here, and it kind of bothers me a little bit what the other party is doing here, I think they are trying to scare people into believe that they are going to be deported when they're not for political purposes. I mean, I don't know whether you guys feel in your position, you can agree with me or not agree with me on that, but if you have two people brought before this committee today, brought all the way to Washington, D.C., and told that they should be scared to death that they're going to be kicked out of this country, when as a practical matter they're not, I just think it's a little bit appalling. Do either of you and your two agencies believe that as this worked its way through the process, either of these two individuals were going to be kicked out of this country?
I can't speak to the individuals that were here because I don't know the facts of their case, but my understanding, and look, the reality is people with medical issues,
two young people with severe
it
medical.
draws at our heartstrings, and I can't see them being removed in the future, but I can't speak to their specific cases. But cases similar to that, we would use discretion, absolutely. Those, as far as ICE is concerned, we would use discretion at the very point on whether we arrest, place in.
Yeah, do either of you believe that these two folks are being kicked out? We're going to be kicked out of the country?
I do not believe that someone.
They both had severe medical.
Similar situation would be, we would use discretion to
Yeah.
use our limited resources to remove that individual.
Right.
We prioritize our resources.
Mr. Renaud, same question?
I would agree with my colleague.
Right. So I believe what's going on here today is for political reasons to embarrass President Trump. We have brought two people in here who are not going to be kicked out of this country, but scared them to death to believe they might be kicked out of the country. And it just wasn't going to happen. There's no way it's going to happen. Now, I'll give you another question, because a lot of the, and I asked this to the prior person here, sometimes in this hearing it's wandered into this idea of minors without their parents are being pulled apart. In this country, in both of your positions, do you see minors in this country without their parents, with both of their parents probably in other countries? Unaccompanied minors.
I don't really understand the question. We have unaccompanied minors here in the country, yes.
Correct, and their parents are in other countries. And the U.S., do they immediately send them back to be reunited with their parents, or do we try to tolerate putting them in this country?
Unaccompanied minors have due process, and that due process is available to everyone illegal in this country.
So minors come here, and they can run away from their parents, and right now the United States doesn't do anything about it.
Well, I think it's unfair to say the United States doesn't do anything about it.
They can wind up in this country for 2 or 3 years till they get a hearing.
So we, for unaccompanied minors that cross the border that we are aware of that are apprehended at the border, there is due process for those unaccompanied minors.
All right. The gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Desaulniers is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I just want to go back to a comment you had just a little while ago, Mr. Renaud. So am I correct in saying that someone knew about Ms. Bueso-Barrera's medical condition when that letter was sent out on August 7th? That's what you just testified. And remind you that she's asked for 4 times and got accepted prior to this. So what you just said is somebody pulled her file.
That is my best estimate of what happened. Yes, I believe that's.
So someone
probably
under your direction, supervision,
yeah, I think
pulled the file and knew what the circumstances were.
so. I think that they understood that that there were cases pending, in process, and that USCIS had stopped issuing deferred action, and so they issued the letter. I don't want to pretend or accuse that individual or make it seem like that individual made a judgment call on her condition and in a heartless way did what they did. We certainly are, we're USCIS. We are empathetic to people in their circumstance, but we have, we are bound by the laws and the regulations and the policies that we have. That is how we operate. As I said earlier, sometimes that means that we have to say yes to someone we'd rather not because we think that there is that there's fraud or misrepresentation or there could be harm to the country. It also means sometimes that we have to say no to people that frankly we feel bad for and we empathize with. That's the hard work done by immigration officers across the country every day.
So she's been approved 4 times in the past. You're going to look at the file again. Is there any chance that she would be denied because the guidelines and the discretion has changed, given that she's been approved 4 times, including during this administration?
Again, I have not looked at her case. I understand what we heard today. I'm not able to comment on.
I thought you just, forgive me, I thought you just did comment and answer Mr. Grothman that you could not imagine that she would not be allowed to stay in the country. Are you changing that testimony?
I think my testimony was that I agree with my colleague, and I defer to his expertise.
And that was what he said. He said he could not imagine a circumstance under which someone in her situation would be denied. Obviously, Mr. Desaulniers has an intense interest in making sure that his constituent has the right to continue to get her medical services.
I was referring to removal. Now, what I'm saying is I don't, when you're talking about stayed in this country, would we remove someone in that situation? I cannot speak to her specific case. I do not know all the facts. And
Okay, so let's be clear then. Mr. Grothman was trying to say that this was some kind of big political show because there was no chance any of these people would be removed, and now what we're getting is answers saying there's a chance that Mr. Desaulniers' constituent will be removed, and she was terrified long before she came to this committee. We didn't know anything about this. There is terror among hundreds of people in an extreme medical condition. So let's stop playing games. I liked it better when you guys just said you couldn't testify. Don't tell Mr. Grothman that there's no chance that people are going to get kicked out of the country and then turn around and tell Mr. Desaulniers that his constituent could get kicked out of the country. I'm sorry, Mr. Desaulniers, your time is restored to you.
You care to respond to that as a humane institution, Mr. Renaud or Mr. Robbins? I'll tell you, Mr. Robbins, if you try to remove her, knowing my constituents, you better bring a lot of buses because a lot of us are going to be arrested trying to protect her.
What I was trying to make clear, if you allow me, was I cannot judge this case here for the people that we're talking about. But what I said was similar cases that have compassionate and compelling humanitarian reasons, we use discretion every day. We have in the past enforcing immigration law, we will in the future. We continuously use discretion on who we arrest, who we place in proceedings, and ultimately remove. What I was saying was if there was a case similar to that, I cannot foresee a similar case being removed from the country, placed into proceedings, and ultimately removed. Now, I can't speak to her specific case because I think it's unfair for me to try to adjudicate that here in this hearing room. But what I can say is that our officers, on a regular basis, use discretion on very sympathetic cases and humanitarian compelling cases. And our officers do it very well. They do it professionally with compassion.
And I appreciate that. And I'm sorry that many moral, ethical people who are in public service have to go through this. And to me, this was not contrived. I mean, these constituents came to me. We heard their testimony about vomiting in a hospital after she'd gotten hours of treatment. But what's changed is this letter. And if either of you or anyone out there is listening, and Mr. Chairman, given your expertise in law, I do feel sorry for these gentlemen being placed here. Because I know where the responsibility is, in my view. But this was a heartless, cruel thing to send out. And Mr. Renaud, knowing that somebody in your organization, I assume you've worked there a long time, knew what this would do and how this deviated from the previous 4 times she applied, we've got to get to the bottom of this, and we've got to hold people accountable. And if they're not going to testify and use a contrived defense to give us the truth, the obvious facts, then I don't know how we pursue it. Do we find them individually in contempt of Congress? As my colleague said, they're responding to the American public. Somebody needs to be held accountable for doing this, and it needs to be corrected. So to say that I'm disappointed as an American to sit here is an understatement. That I don't know where our level of shame or decency will ever come to a point where all of us can say a letter like this is not in the spirit of America, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, and somebody should be held accountable.
Mr. Desaulniers, Ms. Presley, I thank you both for your leadership in putting this on the agenda. Mr. Renaud, Mr. Robbins, I thank you both for appearing today. And, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez will get to close out with 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one of the things that's difficult about this moment is that all of us like to think, all of us, first of all, want to do a good job. And I understand the difficult position that it is when people are career servants and when the politicization of this administration goes in so deep that it politicizes otherwise career positions. I understand and I respect that. But I also understand that at some point in our lives, we reach a moral crossroads. And in the panel right before this one, we heard from a teenager whose little sister died because she couldn't have access to medication, and he has the same disease that she does. And a young woman who has been in this country for 16 years, depending on medical treatment, and deporting her will kill her. This policy will murder her. And we are trying to get to the bottom of the origins of this policy change. And we have to ask you. And you all are citing counsel, which has given you illegitimate reasons to resist answering these questions. The Supreme Court has ruled on it. It's not a debate. So let me see if I can summarize this testimony and see if there's any last chance that you all may want to change your answer. You will not tell us who decided this policy. You will not tell us who at DHS thought it was a good idea. You will not tell Congress if the White House ordered this policy. You will not tell Congress whether you vetted the policy with anyone before you put it in place. You will not tell Congress why the policy was changed. You will not tell Congress what the future policy will be. You will not tell Congress that the future when that future policy will be announced. And you will not tell Congress when you plan to let these families with life and death diagnoses know their fates. Is that all correct?
I think on the balance it is correct, yes.
Now, the claims are based on this idea that there's ongoing litigation. The Supreme Court has ruled that ongoing litigation is not a reason to resist that answer. It has never been the standard under a Democratic or Republican Congress. And we have a job that we have to do too. And our job is ordered by the Constitution of the United States to conduct oversight on these conditions that will kill people. So I would say we should have a chance to answer these questions by this Friday in response to a letter. One question that I have is, who is your counsel? Who advised you to do this?
I take counsel from the DHS General Counsel.
And which individuals at DHS General Counsel advised you to resist answering these questions?
I do not know who made that ultimate decision.
But which individual told you to do it specifically? Certainly someone told you. You're citing counsel. Was it a letter? Was it a meeting?
I will take that back and get back with you if I
So
can.
was it a letter or a meeting? So you won't even tell us who told you to defy the Supreme Court?
I was never told to defy the Supreme Court, ma'am.
To cite reasons in defiance of the Supreme Court?
So to answer your question, I will take those questions back, and if I can provide those answers, I would be happy to do so.
All right. Thank you for agreeing to do that, and I think that we need to have these questions by this Friday. People, they're terrified, their medications are on the line, their entire lives are on the line. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think that we should consider, and I believe that after this hearing we have no recourse but to consider discussing a subpoena to get this information if we don't get it as requested.
Well, I want to thank the Vice Chair of the committee for her insight and views on this. Again, I want to thank both of you for coming and for participating as much as you felt that you could, given the institutional constraints you're operating under. Obviously, this committee is not done with this issue at all. We will be in touch about next steps, but we do look forward to working with you to quelling the chaos that was unleashed when that letter was sent in August, and thank all of you for coming.
Thank you.
Meeting
Thank
is
you very
adjourned.
much.